federal level, that in the entire history of Pennsylvania, there's only been 7 women in U.S. Congress, 0 senators.
That's correct. And there are 0 congresspersons at this moment.
Governors, lieutenant governors. I really thought that Nina Ahmad, who ran against Fetterman, would have been a real asset for lieutenant governor, but Fetterman is going to be our lieutenant governor. It is really shocking. I think that part of that history, though, harkens back to on the one hand, if you look at the history of Pennsylvania, many of our traditions in Pennsylvania are the solid values that many blue state people really are looking for. We invented the separation of church and state. We, in Pennsylvania, set forth the idea that people are created equal. Lots of really deep basic values come out of, we wrote the Constitution, come out of our very deep values. And I'm Mennonite, by the way. I am both Black and Mennonite. But on the other hand, inherent in those same traditions is some deep wells of sexism that we need to get more honest about.
Mm-hmm.
There are other places in the country that don't have those cultural deep wells of sexism, that even Republican places where women have done better and been lifted up and supported in different ways. I don't know, Jane, would you disagree?
No, I wouldn't disagree at all. I think it's really, really stunning and systemic. One of our state reps, Leanne, one of the rare female state reps, Leanne Kruger-Branicki, said that the Statehouse in Harrisburg is the most sexist place she has ever worked in her life. I mean, we've got chapter and verse over there. We've got a guy, a state rep, who he has a PFA against him for strangling another rep he was dating, strangling her, threatening her with a gun.
Yep.
And he's still in office. And as each day goes by, he stands closer to be able to retire with a full pension. We have another guy on the D side who has spent $250,000 of taxpayer dollars to settle sexual harassment claims, and he's still in office. I mean, it goes on and on and on. I mean, it's bad.
Pennsylvania sexism, like Pennsylvania racism, is very polite and very quiet, and yet when you look at the way it works out, is just as much violence as anywhere else. We're not a name-calling, yelling at you kind of a state. We just are really actually sexist and racist.
So Indivisible Berks joins with Tuesdays with Toomey Harrisburg every Tuesday. Every Tuesday we drive an hour to Harrisburg, a little contingent of us, and we join a group of people in front of the federal building where Toomey has an office, and we often do a federal type action, whether federal legislation, and then we often walk around the corner and go to the Statehouse and lobby our state reps. Today we were talking about immigration policy, which is just, I mean, talk about racism. That's the entire history of the United States is now reached its full flower in racist immigration policy, in the imprisonment of children and brown children at the border and everywhere. We have in Berks County one of the few family detention centers in the country, and we're scared to death that it's now going to become some kind of a poster child for how family detention is supposed to work. It's a travesty. Anyway, I digress. We were out there talking. There were 20 or 30 of us out there today, and a Latinx woman was speaking, and actually two women were speaking, and they were verbally harassed by people on the street. So I think that it's true we are, by and large, a polite culture here. That's changing. You know, the president has unlocked the box, and it's now okay to yell and scream and call people names on the public street of the state capitol.
Maybe we could also talk about, you guys both mentioned rural congressional districts. I think a lot of people, when they think of Pennsylvania, especially if they've never driven through Pennsylvania, think of Pennsylvania as Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and don't think a whole lot about what's in between.
Well, one of the challenges to ruralness in Pennsylvania is it's not like ruralness in Ohio, like in Indiana where there's really actually nobody. Pennsylvania is full of tiny towns that are really struggling, and that's a different rural story than massive amounts of corn.
Right.
So if you look at York or Harrisburg or Lancaster, those little towns are underfunded, they are besieged by all the problems of big cities, and they have no money to pay for them.
Exactly. They're under threat of, people getting upset about property taxes. Oh, we got to cut property taxes. It's those people who are going to suffer. Their school systems are going to shut down. Their police and fire, all their municipal services are going to shut down. It's going to be bad. And not to mention the other impacts of healthcare and so on, Medicare and Medicaid, and what's going to happen there. But yeah, Tracy's absolutely right. It's a whole different thing than a million acres of corn. It also means that I don't know, it's interesting. I think Connor Lamb is a great example. We were part of that huge batch of people that helped get Connor Lamb elected. We made phone calls for Connor Lamb. We wrote postcards for Connor Lamb. We had postcard parties where we wrote so many postcards that we ran out of addresses. Is Connor Lamb our ideal candidate? Nope. He's not. But
here's the thing: is I knocked on doors till my feet bled for the Connor Lamb campaign.
Yes.
And he doesn't have to be my ideal candidate. He has to be the ideal candidate for the voter in the district for which he is running. Exactly. He would never be elected. Mike Doyle, my congressman, I would stand with. He would never get elected in Connor Lamb's district because he is vastly to the left of him. To me, the moral imperative of redistricting is that Connor Lamb has transformed as a candidate. The things that he could say before as a candidate, okay, I had a personal conversation with him and I asked him about racism following the president's shithole comments. Mm-hmm. Everybody remembers the shithole comments. And he said, that wasn't nice. He shouldn't have said it. That wasn't what I needed him to say, but that was what the people who were going to vote for him needed him to say. And so I let it go. Recently, like this week, in Pittsburgh, we've had the tragic police shooting of a young man named Antoine Rose, who was a nice young man who ran from the police. Recently hired officer shot him 3 times in the back. And most people in the country have seen it. And Connor Lamb came out and spoke about it and at least said, we need to investigate this and more justice. And it's because he's running in a different district now. The district with redistricting that he's running in has many, many more people of color. And it not only means that he can more effectively represent people of color, which is nice, it means he can more effectively represent Americans because he's not in a gerrymandered district that only reflects the view of a narrow group of Americans. He is in a district that, Jane got it right. What is that term? Equally potent. He is in a geographically potent district that reflects a reasonable diversity of American opinion. So it doesn't have to fight extremism in that way. Gerrymandering makes us into extremists who can only argue about things because we have to win extremist districts.
And it also makes us unrepresented because of safe seats. People with safe seats, they don't care. They've got their voters. They don't care.
And they don't have to discuss new ideas or policies or people in any way, shape, or form.
But are there any topics or things you want to make sure that we get to?
I think that Pittsburgh is a really extraordinary place, and people don't know that. Pittsburgh is a place where people with really deep differences have come together powerfully to organize, not just marches, but to organize for the Lamb campaign. The district, the national news tried to paint Connor Lamb as being in rural Pennsylvania, but it's 10 miles from here. But city people went out there to help. Those people have come in to help. We have created these really powerful coalitions around Western Pennsylvania that really reflect our deep roots as organizers. So when I speak, one of the things I frequently say is from the people in Homestead and the steelworker strikes in Homestead, we in Western Pennsylvania has always known that when the people organize, the people speak.
Very cool.
And that's what I would like people to know. I mean, my concern is I think America needs to stand with children. I am terrified that the current cuts in food stamps, I'm a social worker, are going to mean that like in Homestead, we will see children with rickets. And those strikers at Homestead, people like to focus on them upset about their pay. But one of the issues they were most upset about was childhood diseases. Mm-hmm. And if we cut food stamps, we will see those childhood diseases again. I lived in South Africa, and I saw diseases I never want to see in my country. And we're going to see kids on the street with kwashiorkor. And that's terrifying.
One thing I'd like to talk about is what the movement, and I don't like to call it the resistance anymore. We are resisting. We're doing everything we possibly can to resist the onslaught of the authoritarian racist policies of this administration, but we're also building. So I think of our movement as a tremendously positive thing. So I don't want to call it the resistance, but I want to talk about the role that we're playing apart from the party and the candidate. And what that is building independent political power we're going out and reaching voters that are disaffected, that are disgusted with both parties, that that quite rightly will say to some candidate who's at their door, you only come here once every 4 years. You just want my vote, and that's all I ever see from you. We're trying to organize around a very different model that's issue-based, values-based, and it says, hey, do you care about public education? Well, yeah, that's really important. These are the issues that are driving a lot of voters. And by the way, there are some candidates that you can vote for that are really supportive of that. So not only vote for them, but continue to hold them accountable. Our model it's nonstop. I mean, I think we've learned it the hard way. We worked so hard to get Obama elected, and then we just sat back and said, this is cool. Mm-hmm. This is cool. And we didn't do the hard work of holding Congress accountable and making sure we had a farm team and people coming up and people being aware of who they're elected. Talk about people not knowing where Pittsburgh is. I mean, we've got people who don't know who their congressperson are. That's one of our jobs, is to say, hey, you have a congressperson and it's that person's job to represent you. And if they don't, you can, one, vote them out, and two, you can keep pressing them over and over. You can organize your friends. You can organize a whole gang of people to go and lobby that congressperson. It's your job as a citizen to not just to vote. It's not enough, but to hold those people accountable, to elect people who represent your values, and then keep holding them accountable. Never, ever stop. So to me, that's what's exciting about this movement, and like what Tracy's talking about, these amazing coalitions of diverse groups coming together. People are waking up that have not been moved by the party.
Jane, to follow up on that, I think that there's also layers of change, because I think part of what happens is you have one march and you have people who attend it. And then they're like, whoa, I could do something. And when I talk to people who are organizing different things, most of them were transformed by attending someone else's event. And I do think that that there is an accumulative effect of activating people. I mean, my biggest concern is voter registration. So I've been focusing on creating people who are voter registrars. And I think that going into the fall, that's what we've got to do, is create more human voter registrars.
I totally agree. But there's also like 700 major issues that we have to fight. I mean, there's, the city of Reading is a majority Latinx city. People there are living in abject terror of ICE raids, of deportation. Mm-hmm. We have mushroom farms. We have undocumented people who are working there who get raided. They get picked off like pigeons in a pigeon chute.
Absolutely, and we have an entire state full of African Americans who are terrified of the police. Yeah. I've actually been pulled over and held by the police for more than an hour for the crime of driving my friend's brand new minivan. So I was driving a friend's brand new minivan. It was like a day old. She'd lent it to me for our youth and government event. And I drove through a small town, and they pulled me over for an hour with dogs and held me there until I cried like a baby. And I was let go. I'm middle class and educated. But I knew in that time that they owned me, and it was very educational. So I think that Pennsylvania loves children. I think that Pennsylvania Democrats and maybe national Democrats need to stand with the idea that Democrats love children. That we don't shoot children, that we don't cage children, and we don't cut their food stamps.
I want to pick up on something Tracy said about the layers of involvement. She's absolutely right there. I can't even count the number of issues that we need to deal with. Voter registration, voter suppression, immigration, healthcare, the economy, etc. Fracking. We've got fracking over here. It's, our water catches fire. A million different issues, but there's also a million different ways that people are learning to get involved. Some people will show up at a rally. It's their first thing. We've got, we had a rally this morning. I got a rally on Sunday. I got another rally on Wednesday. People show up at rallies, but then you have to say, okay, great, awesome. Now you can make a phone call. Call your legislator. Go lobby your legislator. Get your friend to vote. Wake your friend up. Tell your friend, hey, did you know that our state rep wants to put buckets of rocks in our classrooms, and that's what he's got to offer.